The new girl's backpack was ripped by bullies. Then she shattered their entire gang. Maya Chen stepped through the heavy doors of Lincoln High School with butterflies dancing in her stomach. Her family had moved from Seattle to this small Ohio town just 3 days ago, and everything felt different here. The hallways smelled like floor wax and teenage anxiety. Students rushed past her in groups, their voices echoing off the lockers like a symphony she didn't know how to join. She clutched her worn leather backpack tighter against her shoulder. It was her most treasured possession, a gift from her grandmother before she passed away last year. The bag was covered in patches from different cities Maya had visited with her family, each one telling a story of adventure and discovery. Her grandmother had sewn them on personally, her weathered fingers working carefully with needle and thread while sharing tales of her own travels as a young woman. The first few classes went smoothly enough. Maya kept her head down, taking notes and trying not to draw attention to herself. During lunch, she found an empty table near the windows and pulled out her sandwich, watching other students laugh and chat in their established groups. She noticed a group of 5 students at a corner table who seemed to command the entire cafeteria's attention. They wore expensive clothes and spoke loudly, their confidence filling the room like expensive perfume. Their leader was a tall blonde girl named Brittany, whose perfectly styled hair and designer handbag screamed wealth and status. Next to her sat Marcus, a football player whose broad shoulders and cocky grin made other students step aside when he walked through the halls. There was Jessica, who seemed to exist solely to agree with everything Brittany said, nodding like a bobblehead whenever the queen bee spoke. Twin brothers Jake and Josh rounded out the group, known for their cruel pranks and their ability to make anyone's life miserable if they chose to target them. Maya had encountered groups like this before in her previous schools. She knew the best strategy was to stay invisible, to blend into the background until she could find her place among kinder souls. But fate had other plans for her that day. As the lunch period ended, Maya gathered her things and headed toward her locker. The hallway was crowded with students rushing to their next classes, and she found herself caught in the flow of bodies moving like a river toward their destinations. She was fumbling with her combination lock when she felt a deliberate shove from behind. Her backpack went flying, and she heard the sickening sound of fabric tearing. Maya spun around to see her precious bag on the floor, one of the straps completely ripped off and several of her grandmother's carefully sewn patches scattered across the dirty hallway floor. Students stepped over and around the mess, some pausing to look but none stopping to help. Standing over her ruined belongings was Brittany, flanked by her crew, all of them wearing matching smirks of satisfaction. "Oops," Brittany said with mock innocence, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Looks like the new girl needs to learn how to walk properly in our school." Maya knelt down to gather her scattered belongings, her hands shaking not with fear but with a rage so pure it surprised her. She had been pushed around before, had her things destroyed by bullies who thought they could break her spirit. But this backpack represented something sacred, the love of her grandmother, the memories of their travels together, the stories embedded in every patch and stitch. As she carefully picked up each torn patch, Maya felt something shift inside her. She had always been the quiet one, the peacemaker, the girl who absorbed punishment and moved on. But looking at the destruction of something so precious, something that connected her to the woman who had taught her to be strong and brave, Maya realized that sometimes being quiet wasn't the same as being weak. She stood up slowly, cradling the damaged bag against her chest like an injured bird. The hallway had mostly cleared now, leaving just Maya and the 5 bullies who thought they had just claimed another victim. But when Maya looked up at Brittany, there was something in her dark eyes that made the older girl take a small step backward. "You have no idea what you just did," Maya said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm raging in her heart. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. She turned and walked away, leaving Brittany and her gang standing in the hallway, suddenly uncertain about what they had just unleashed. That afternoon, Maya sat in her bedroom, carefully examining the damage to her backpack. Some of the patches could be reattached, but others were too damaged to save. As she worked, her mind wasn't on repair. It was on reconnaissance. She had spent her lunch period not eating but observing. She had watched the social dynamics of Lincoln High School like a scientist studying a complex ecosystem. Every group had its weaknesses, every bully had their insecurities, and every kingdom could fall if the right pressure was applied to the right places. Maya had learned this truth in her previous schools, but she had never had reason to use it. Now, looking at her grandmother's ruined work, she felt that reason burning bright and clear. Brittany's gang thought they ruled Lincoln High School. They thought they were untouchable, protected by their popularity and their cruelty. But Maya had seen something they hadn't noticed: the cracks in their foundation, the resentment simmering beneath the surface, the students who smiled at them but rolled their eyes when they thought no one was looking. As the sun set outside her window, Maya made a decision that would change everything. She wouldn't just survive at Lincoln High School, she would thrive. And in the process, she would teach Brittany's gang a lesson they would never forget. The quiet new girl was about to become their worst nightmare, and they had brought it entirely upon themselves. Maya spent the next morning before school sitting in the library, her laptop open to what looked like homework, but was actually something far more strategic. She had created detailed profiles of each member of Brittany's gang, noting their schedules, their fears, their secrets, and most importantly, their relationships with each other. Information was power, and Maya had always been exceptionally good at gathering it. She discovered that Marcus, the tough football player, was actually failing 3 classes and desperately needed to maintain his grades to stay on the team. His scholarship depended on it, and his single mother was counting on that scholarship to pay for college. Jessica, Brittany's constant companion, was secretly dating someone Brittany had explicitly forbidden her to see. The twins Jake and Josh had a reputation for pranks, but Maya learned they had recently been caught vandalizing school property and were one incident away from suspension. But most interesting of all was Brittany herself. The queen bee of Lincoln High School had built her empire on the foundation of her family's wealth and her seemingly perfect life. But Maya's careful observation revealed cracks in that perfect facade. Brittany's parents were going through a messy divorce, and the family's financial situation wasn't as stable as everyone believed. The designer clothes and expensive accessories were mostly knockoffs, carefully chosen to maintain an image that was becoming harder and harder to sustain. Armed with this knowledge, Maya began her campaign not with dramatic confrontation, but with subtle manipulation that would make each member of the gang question their loyalty to their leader. She started with Marcus, approaching him after his disastrous performance in chemistry class. "I couldn't help but notice you're struggling with the molecular structures," Maya said, sliding into the seat next to him in the nearly empty classroom. "I've always been pretty good at chemistry. Maybe I could help you study?" Marcus looked at her suspiciously. He remembered her from the hallway incident, remembered how Brittany had destroyed her backpack. But he was drowning in his classes and pride couldn't pay for college. "Why would you want to help me?" he asked. Maya shrugged, her expression innocent and helpful. "I'm new here and I don't really know anyone yet. Plus, I know what it's like to have a lot riding on your grades. My dad always says that when you help others succeed, you succeed too." What Marcus didn't realize was that Maya's help came with subtle psychological pressure. During their study sessions, she would casually mention how impressed she was by students who thought for themselves, who didn't just follow the crowd. She talked about her previous school, where the real leaders were the ones who stood up for what was right even when it was difficult. Meanwhile, Maya was working on Jessica through a different approach. She had noticed that Jessica ate lunch alone on Wednesdays when Brittany had student council meetings. Maya strategically chose that day to sit nearby, close enough to overhear Jessica's phone conversations with her secret boyfriend. "I hate lying to her," Jessica whispered into her phone, glancing around nervously. "But you know how Brittany gets. She thinks she controls everyone's life." Maya didn't approach Jessica directly that day. Instead, she simply made sure Jessica noticed her. The girl whose backpack Brittany had destroyed, now sitting quietly with a book, minding her own business. She wanted Jessica to see her as a real person, not just a target. The twins were a different challenge entirely. Jake and Josh fed off each other's energy and Brittany's approval. They were the muscle of the operation, the ones who carried out the physical intimidation. But Maya had noticed something crucial about them. They were fiercely protective of their younger sister, who was a freshman struggling to fit in herself. Maya began volunteering to tutor struggling students in the library after school. She made sure word got around that she was helping kids who were having trouble. And she waited. Sure enough, within a week, Jake and Josh's sister Emma showed up, looking embarrassed and desperate. "I heard you help people with math," Emma said quietly. sliding into the chair across from Maya. "I'm really bad at algebra, and my brothers will kill me if I fail." Maya smiled warmly. "Of course I'll help you. Math can be tricky, but once you understand the patterns, it becomes much easier." As Maya worked with Emma over the following weeks, she learned about the twins' home life, their fears, their dreams beyond high school. Emma talked about how her brothers put on a tough act at school, but were actually incredibly kind and protective at home. They worked part-time jobs to help their family make ends meet, and they worried constantly about Emma's happiness and success. Through Emma, Maya began to plant seeds of doubt about Brittany's leadership. She never spoke against Brittany directly. That would have been too obvious. Instead, she talked about kindness, about how the strongest people were those who lifted others up instead of tearing them down. She shared stories about her grandmother, who had taught her that true power came from making others feel valued and important. Maya's strategy was working exactly as she had planned. Marcus was beginning to question why he followed someone who demanded loyalty, but gave nothing in return. Jessica was growing tired of hiding her relationship and lying to maintain Brittany's approval. The twins were starting to see their intimidation tactics through their sister's innocent eyes, and they didn't like what they saw. But Maya saved her most devastating move for Brittany herself. She knew that the queen bee's greatest fear wasn't losing her popularity or her boyfriend or even her status at school. Brittany's greatest fear was being exposed as ordinary, as someone struggling with the same problems as everyone else. Maya began her psychological warfare against Brittany with seemingly innocent kindness. When Brittany's designer handbag broke in the hallway, Maya was there with a safety pin to help fix it temporarily. When Brittany forgot her lunch money, Maya quietly slipped her a few dollars without making a big deal about it. When Brittany looked stressed about a test, Maya offered her notes with a smile. Each act of kindness was a small dagger to Brittany's confidence. Maya never asked for anything in return, never mentioned the backpack incident, never acknowledged their conflict. She simply treated Brittany like any other struggling student who needed help, and that drove Brittany absolutely crazy, because Maya's kindness highlighted everything that Brittany was not. Where Brittany ruled through fear, Maya led through service. Where Brittany demanded loyalty, Maya earned respect. Where Brittany created enemies, Maya gathered allies. The other students began to notice the difference. They saw Maya helping struggling classmates while Brittany mocked them. They watched Maya include lonely students in conversations, while Brittany excluded anyone who didn't meet her standards. They witnessed Maya's quiet strength in the face of Brittany's loud aggression. Maya's reputation at Lincoln High School was growing, but not in the way anyone expected. She wasn't becoming popular in the traditional sense. She was becoming something much more dangerous to Brittany's reign. She was becoming respected, trusted, and genuinely liked by students from every social group. The foundation of Brittany's empire was beginning to crack, and Maya hadn't even played her strongest cards yet. 3 weeks after the backpack incident, the cracks in Brittany's gang were becoming impossible to ignore. Maya watched from her carefully chosen seat in the cafeteria as tension simmered at the popular table. Marcus sat hunched over his chemistry textbook instead of laughing at Brittany's jokes. Jessica checked her phone constantly, her face lighting up with secret smiles that made Brittany's eyes narrow with suspicion. The twins exchanged worried glances whenever Brittany suggested a new target for their harassment. Maya had been patient, building relationships and gathering intelligence like a master chess player setting up for checkmate. But patience alone wouldn't topple Brittany's kingdom. It was time to make her first real move. The opportunity came during the annual school talent show auditions. Brittany had been planning to perform a dance routine with Jessica, something they did every year to maintain their status as the school's golden girls. But this year, Jessica had been hesitating, making excuses, clearly torn between loyalty to Brittany and her own growing discomfort with their cruel behavior. Maya approached Jessica after school, finding her sitting alone on the bleachers, staring at the talent show sign-up sheet in her hands. "Having second thoughts about the audition?" Maya asked gently, sitting down a respectful distance away. Jessica looked startled, then defensive. "It's none of your business." "You're right," Maya agreed easily. "I just remember how much you seemed to enjoy singing in the choir last year. I heard you have a beautiful voice." Jessica's expression softened slightly. Few people remembered that she had been in choir before Brittany decided it wasn't cool enough for her image. Brittany says solo acts are selfish. She thinks partner performances show better teamwork. Maya nodded thoughtfully. That's one way to look at it. Another way might be that some people are afraid to let their friends shine too brightly, because it might make them feel ordinary by comparison. The words hit their target. Jessica had been feeling increasingly suffocated by Brittany's need to control every aspect of her life, including her talents. Maya didn't push the conversation further. She had planted the seed, and now she would let Jessica's own frustrations water it. Meanwhile, Maya was orchestrating a much more complex psychological operation with the twins. She had been spending time with their sister Emma, genuinely helping her with math but also carefully sharing stories about her own brothers back in Seattle. She talked about how proud she was of them, how they had taught her to stand up to bullies by protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Your brothers seem really different at home than they are at school, Maya observed one afternoon as she helped Emma with algebra. Emma nodded eagerly. They're the best big brothers ever. They always stand up for kids who are getting picked on in our neighborhood. Jake stopped some older kids from taking a little boy's bike last month, and Josh helped our neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez carry her groceries every day when she hurt her back. Maya smiled warmly. That's exactly the kind of thing real leaders do. They use their strength to help people, not hurt them. Emma's face clouded over slightly. Sometimes I wish they would do that at school too. I hear stories about things they do with Brittany's group, and it doesn't sound like them at all. Maya didn't respond directly, but she made sure her expression showed understanding and gentle sadness. Emma was smart enough to draw her own conclusions, and those conclusions would inevitably make their way back to her brothers. The psychological pressure on Marcus was building from multiple directions. Maya continued to tutor him in chemistry, and his grades were improving dramatically. But more importantly, his respect for Maya was growing while his respect for Brittany diminished. During one study session, Marcus brought up the elephant in the room. "Why are you helping me?" he asked suddenly, looking up from his textbook. "Brittany trashed your stuff and I just stood there and let it happen." Maya met his eyes steadily. "Because your future is more important than past mistakes. Besides, I don't judge people by their worst moments. I judge them by what they do when they have the chance to choose differently." Marcus felt the weight of those words. He had been choosing to follow Brittany out of habit and social convenience, not because he believed in what she was doing. Maya's kindness was showing him what real leadership looked like, and the contrast with Brittany's rule by fear was becoming impossible to ignore. But Maya's masterstroke was still to come. She had been carefully observing Brittany's behavior, noting the increasing desperation in her attempts to maintain control. Brittany was becoming more erratic, more demanding, more cruel as she sensed her empire slipping away. She couldn't identify the source of the threat. Maya remained outwardly respectful and helpful, but she could feel the shift in power dynamics like an animal sensing an approaching storm. Maya decided it was time to apply direct pressure. She chose the perfect moment, during lunch, when Brittany was holding court at her usual table, trying to regain her followers' attention with increasingly outrageous stories and demands for loyalty. Maya walked directly to Brittany's table, carrying her repaired backpack. She had spent weeks carefully reattaching the patches, some with visible stitches that served as permanent reminders of what had been damaged. The bag looked different now, scarred but stronger, like someone who had survived a battle. "Hi, Brittany," Maya said pleasantly, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet cafeteria. "I wanted to thank you." Brittany looked confused and suspicious. This wasn't how victims were supposed to behave. "Thank me for what?" Maya smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Marcus shift uncomfortably, and Jessica looked down at her hands. "For teaching me something important about this school. You showed me exactly the kind of person I don't want to be." The cafeteria was dead silent now. Students at nearby tables had stopped eating, stopped talking, stopped pretending not to listen. Maya continued, her voice warm but carrying clearly to every corner of the room. "You see, when you destroyed my backpack, you thought you were showing everyone how powerful you are. But what you actually showed them was how afraid you are. Afraid that if people got to know the real you, the one whose parents are getting divorced, who buys knockoff designer bags to keep up appearances, who has to tear other people down to feel important, they might not think you're as special as you pretend to be." Brittany's face went white, then read. Several students gasped at Maya's casual revelation of Brittany's closely guarded secrets, but Maya wasn't finished. The thing is, being vulnerable doesn't make you weak. Being real doesn't make you ordinary. But being cruel? That makes you forgettable. And I think deep down, you know that. Maya turned to address the rest of the gang, her expression shifting to something gentler, but no less powerful. Marcus, Jessica, Jake, Josh, you're all better than this. You're smart, talented, kind people who deserve friends who see your value, not a leader who only keeps you around to make herself feel superior. With that, Maya walked away, leaving Brittany's table in stunned silence. She had just done something unprecedented at Lincoln High School. She had challenged the Queen Bee directly, in public, and she had done it without raising her voice, without stooping to cruelty, without becoming the very thing she opposed. The psychological impact was devastating. Brittany's carefully constructed image had been shattered in front of the entire school, not by lies or rumors, but by simple truth delivered with quiet confidence. Her followers were forced to confront the reality of who they had been serving and why. Maya had just fired the first public shot in a war that Brittany was already losing. And the most terrifying part for the former Queen Bee was that Maya had done it with kindness, intelligence, and genuine leadership, weapons that Brittany had never learned to use and didn't know how to defend against. The day after Maya's public confrontation with Brittany, Lincoln High School felt like a different place. Students whispered in hallways, their conversations buzzing with excitement and disbelief. Someone had finally stood up to Brittany Morrison, and they had done it without screaming, without violence, without becoming a bully themselves. The new girl had exposed the Queen Bee's secrets with surgical precision, leaving everyone wondering what would happen next. Maya arrived at school that morning expecting retaliation, but she was prepared for anything Brittany might throw at her. What she didn't expect was Marcus waiting by her locker, his usual confident swagger replaced by nervous energy. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly, glancing around to make sure none of Brittany's remaining loyalists were watching. They walked to an empty classroom, and Marcus closed the door behind them. For a long moment he just stood there, struggling with words that didn't come easily. "Everything you said yesterday, about us being better than this." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration clear in his voice. "You're right. And I hate that you're right because it means I've been lying to myself for 2 years. Maya waited patiently, knowing that Marcus needed to work through this himself. "I started hanging out with Brittany because it was easy," he continued. "She made all the social decisions, told us who to like, who to ignore, who to target. I didn't have to think about whether it was right or wrong. I just had to follow orders. But watching you these past few weeks, seeing how you treat people," he looked up at her with something like admiration. "You make it look effortless being decent to everyone." "It's not effortless," Maya said honestly. "Every day I have to choose to be kind instead of cruel, to build people up instead of tearing them down. The difference is that those choices become easier the more you make them." Marcus nodded slowly. "I want to make different choices, but I don't know how to start." Maya smiled, recognizing the moment she had been waiting for. "Start by being honest about what you really want, not what Brittany tells you to want." Meanwhile, across the school, Jessica was having her own crisis of conscience. She had spent most of the previous night on the phone with her secret boyfriend, crying as she finally admitted how trapped she felt in Brittany's orbit. The public confrontation had forced her to acknowledge what she had been trying to ignore. She had become someone she didn't recognize, someone who laughed at cruelty and participated in making others miserable. During lunch, instead of sitting at Brittany's table, Jessica approached the music teacher about auditioning for the talent show as a solo act. Her hands shook as she signed her name to the audition sheet, but for the first time in months she felt like she was making a decision that was truly her own. The twins were struggling with their own awakening. Emma had come home from her tutoring session with Maya the night before and asked her brothers a question that had been haunting them ever since. "Why do you act so mean at school when you're so nice everywhere else?" Jake and Josh had tried to explain about fitting in, about social survival, about how high school worked. But their words sounded hollow even to themselves. How could they explain to their innocent little sister that they had chosen popularity over principles? How could they justify participating in the very behavior they would never tolerate in their own neighborhood? The breaking point came when they witnessed Brittany's desperate attempt to regain control. Furious about Maya's public humiliation, and sensing her followers slipping away, Brittany decided to escalate the conflict. She cornered a shy freshman named David in the hallway, someone she knew Maya had been helping with homework. "Maybe you should be more careful about who you associate with," Brittany told David, her voice carrying the familiar edge of threat. "New girls who don't know their place have a way of making life difficult for everyone around them." David looked terrified, but before he could respond, Jake stepped forward. "Leave him alone, Brittany." Brittany whirled around, shock and fury competing on her face. "Excuse me." Josh joined his brother, the twins presenting a united front for the first time against their supposed leader. "You heard him. David doesn't deserve this, and neither did Maya. Are you seriously choosing that nobody over me?" Brittany's voice rose, attracting attention from other students. "After everything I've done for you?" Jake looked at his brother, then back at Brittany, and suddenly saw her clearly for the first time. She wasn't a leader. She was a bully who had convinced them to become bullies too. "What exactly have you done for us, Brittany? Made us into people our little sister is ashamed of?" The crowd that had gathered watched in stunned silence as Brittany's last loyal enforcers walked away from her, leaving her standing alone in the hallway with her mouth open in shock. Word of the twins' defection spread through the school like wildfire. By the end of the day, Brittany's empire had crumbled completely. Marcus was openly studying with Maya in the library, no longer caring who saw them together. Jessica had not only auditioned for the talent show but had been selected to perform, her beautiful voice finally free to shine without Brittany's jealous restrictions. The twins were eating lunch with David and some of the other students they had previously intimidated, making amends and building new friendships based on mutual respect rather than fear. But Maya wasn't content to simply destroy Brittany's power. She wanted to offer redemption as well. She found Brittany after school, sitting alone on the same bleachers where she had once held court, now abandoned by everyone who had once hung on her every word. "I know you probably hate me right now," Maya said, sitting down beside her former tormentor. Brittany didn't look at her. "They all left me. Everyone I thought cared about me just walked away." Maya considered her words carefully. "They didn't leave you, Brittany. They left the person you were pretending to be. The question is, who are you when you're not trying to control everyone around you?" For the first time since Maya had known her, Brittany looked vulnerable, uncertain, real. "I don't know. I've been playing this role for so long I can't remember who I was before." Maya's voice was gentle but firm. "Then maybe it's time to find out. Your parents' divorce, your family's money problems, the pressure to be perfect all the time. None of that makes you a bad person. But using your pain as an excuse to hurt others does." Brittany finally looked at Maya, her eyes red with unshed tears. "Why are you being nice to me?" "I destroyed your grandmother's backpack." "I tried to make your life miserable." Maya smiled sadly. "Because holding on to anger only hurts the person carrying it. And because everyone deserves a chance to choose who they want to be." The conversation didn't end with a dramatic reconciliation or instant friendship. Real change was harder and slower than that. But it ended with Brittany nodding slightly, the first crack in the wall she had built around her heart. As Maya walked home that afternoon, she thought about her grandmother, who had taught her that true strength came not from conquering others but from lifting them up. The backpack on her shoulders bore the scars of Brittany's attack, but it also carried something new, the weight of responsibility that came with leadership. Maya had shattered Brittany's gang not through destruction, but through construction, building something better in its place. She had shown Lincoln High School that there was another way to have power, another way to be strong, another way to matter. And in doing so, she had changed not just her own story, but the stories of everyone around her. 2 months after the collapse of Brittany's regime, Lincoln High School had transformed into a place Maya barely recognized. The hallways that had once been dominated by whispered fears and careful avoidance now buzzed with genuine friendship and collaboration. Students who had previously hidden in shadows were discovering their voices, talents, and worth. Marcus had become something of a revelation to his teachers and teammates. His improved grades were just the beginning. He had started a peer tutoring program for student athletes, ensuring that academic success became as valued as athletic achievement. His natural leadership abilities, once used to intimidate others on Brittany's behalf, now inspired his teammates to excellence both on and off the field. College scouts weren't just noticing his performance in games anymore. They were impressed by his character and his commitment to lifting up his fellow students. Jessica had blossomed in ways that surprised everyone, including herself. Her solo performance at the talent show had earned a standing ovation and revealed a voice so beautiful that the choir director immediately offered her the lead in the school musical. But more than that, she had discovered her own opinions, her own interests, her own dreams. She was dating openly now, no longer hiding her relationship or asking permission to be happy. The confidence she gained from making her own choices had transformed her from Brittany's shadow into her own bright light. The twins had perhaps changed the most dramatically of all. Jake had channeled his protective instincts into starting an anti-bullying club that met every week after school. They organized awareness campaigns, offered support to students who were being harassed, and worked with teachers to create safer spaces throughout the school. Josh had discovered a talent for art and was using his creativity to design posters and materials for their campaigns. Their little sister Emma beamed with pride whenever she saw her brothers using their strength to protect others, instead of joining in their torment. Maya watched these transformations with quiet satisfaction, but she knew her work wasn't finished. There was still one person who remained isolated, angry and resistant to change. Brittany had spent the past 2 months alternating between fury and despair, unable to accept her fall from power and unwilling to engage in the hard work of self-reflection and growth. Maya had tried several times to reach out to Brittany, but each attempt had been met with hostility or silence. Brittany ate lunch alone now, her former kingdom in ruins around her, too proud to admit she needed help and too hurt to accept it when it was offered. She had become what she had always feared most: invisible. The opportunity for a breakthrough came during the school's annual community service week. Maya had volunteered to help coordinate projects that would connect students with local organizations in need. She was sorting through applications when she noticed one that had been submitted anonymously: a request to organize visits to the Sunset Manor nursing home, where elderly residents rarely received visitors and often spent weeks without meaningful human contact. Maya had a strong suspicion about who had submitted this application, and her detective work confirmed it. Brittany's grandmother lived at Sunset Manor, and according to the nursing staff Maya spoke with, Brittany was one of the few family members who visited regularly, spending hours each week reading to residents and helping with activities. This was the side of Brittany that no one at school had ever seen: the granddaughter who sang lullabies to dementia patients, who remembered everyone's favorite foods and brought special treats, who had once organized a birthday party for a resident who hadn't celebrated in 5 years. At Sunset Manor, Brittany wasn't a queen bee or a bully. She was simply a young woman with a capacity for kindness that she had buried beneath layers of hurt and defensive cruelty. Maya made her decision carefully. Instead of confronting Brittany directly about the nursing home visits, she assigned herself to the Sunset Manor project and showed up on the first day as a volunteer. Brittany's shock at seeing her there was quickly replaced by anger. "What are you doing here?" Brittany demanded, her voice sharp with suspicion. "Volunteering," Maya said simply. "Same as you." They worked in tense silence for the first hour, Maya helping residents with crafts while Brittany read stories to a group of elderly women who clearly adored her. But Maya's presence seemed to make Brittany self-conscious, and she was more brusque than usual, her kindness buried under layers of defensive behavior. It was Mrs. Patterson, an 89-year-old former teacher with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, who finally broke the ice. "Brittany, dear," she said loudly enough for Maya to hear, "are you going to introduce us to your friend? Or are you going to keep pouting like a child who's lost her favorite toy?" Brittany's face flushed red. "She's not my friend, Mrs. Patterson." Maya looked up from the painting project she was helping with and smiled warmly at the elderly woman. "I'm Maya Chen. I'm new at Brittany's school, and I volunteered to help here because I heard wonderful things about this place." Mrs. Patterson's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Oh, you're the famous Maya. Brittany talks about you all the time." "I do not," Brittany protested, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. "Oh, child," Mrs. Patterson chuckled. "You've mentioned that girl more times than I can count. Maya did this. Maya said that. Maya makes everyone like her so easily." Sounds like someone's been paying attention. Maya watched as Brittany's carefully constructed walls began to crack. Here, surrounded by people who knew her heart, Brittany couldn't maintain the cold, cruel persona she wore at school. The elderly residents saw through her defenses because they had known real hardship. Real loss, real pain. They recognized a wounded soul trying to protect itself. As the afternoon progressed, Maya observed the real Brittany emerge. She watched her former tormentor gently help Mr. Rodriguez with his physical therapy exercises, patiently explaining each movement despite his frustration. She saw Brittany's face light up when Mrs. Chen, no relation to Maya, showed off the scarf she had been knitting. And she noticed how Brittany remembered every resident's story, their children's names, their favorite songs from decades past. During a quiet moment while the residents were resting, Brittany found herself working alongside Maya to organize craft supplies. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken words. "Why are you really here?" Brittany asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Maya continued sorting colored paper, her movements calm and deliberate. "Because I wanted to understand who you really are. At school, you're so focused on being feared that no one gets to see this side of you." Brittany's hands stilled in their work. "This doesn't change anything between us, doesn't it?" Maya looked up, her eyes gentle but direct. "Brittany, the person I've watched here today, the one who spent 20 minutes helping Mrs. Wilson find her lost wedding ring, who remembers that Mr. Martinez likes extra sugar in his coffee, who organized a birthday celebration for someone she barely knows. That person could have friends instead of followers. Real friends who care about her, not her status." Tears threatened at the corners of Brittany's eyes. "You don't understand. At school, if people see weakness, they destroy you. I learned that lesson early." Maya set down her supplies and turned to face Brittany fully. "Who taught you that? Who made you believe that being kind was the same as being weak?" The question hit its mark. Brittany's face crumpled slightly as she remembered the cruel treatment she had received in middle school. When her parents' marriage first started falling apart, and she had been vulnerable, seeking comfort from classmates who had turned her pain into entertainment. She had sworn never to be vulnerable again, never to let anyone see her hurt or fear or need for connection. "I used to be like this all the time," Brittany admitted, her voice so quiet Maya had to lean in to hear her. "Before everything fell apart at home, before I learned that people would use your kindness against you. I used to help everyone, stand up for the underdogs, try to make everyone feel included." Maya's heart ached for the girl Brittany had been, the one who had been hurt so deeply that she had built walls so high she could barely remember what life looked like without them. "That girl is still in there," Maya said softly. "I can see her every time you smile at Mrs. Patterson, every time you take the time to really listen to these residents' stories. She's been waiting for it to be safe to come back out." Brittany wiped her eyes quickly, glancing around to make sure none of the residents had noticed her moment of vulnerability. "Even if that were true, it's too late. Everyone at school hates me now. I burned every bridge, hurt every person who might have cared about me." Maya shook her head. "Brittany, look at Marcus, Jessica, Jake, and Josh. They all found their way back to being decent people. They all found forgiveness and friendship when they chose to change. Why would you be different?" "Because I was the leader. I made the choices that turned them into people they didn't want to be. The responsibility is mine." For the first time since Maya had known her, Brittany was taking full accountability for her actions instead of making excuses or blaming others. It was a crucial step toward real change. "You're right," Maya agreed. "You do bear responsibility. But responsibility isn't the same as permanent damnation. The question is, what are you going to do with that responsibility now?" As they finished organizing the supplies, Brittany seemed to be wrestling with thoughts too big for words. The afternoon at Sunset Manor had forced her to confront the person she had become, and the person she had once been. Maya could see the war playing out behind her eyes, the part of her that wanted to remain safe behind her walls, and the part that longed to reconnect with her own capacity for goodness. When it was time to leave, Mrs. Patterson called Brittany over for their usual goodbye hug. As the elderly woman whispered something in Brittany's ear, Maya saw tears flow freely down her former enemy's cheeks. Outside the nursing home, Brittany and Maya walked to their cars in silence. Just as Maya was about to drive away, Brittany knocked on her window. "What Mrs. Patterson told me," Brittany said when Maya rolled down the window. "She said that everyone deserves a chance to write a new ending to their story, but some people are too scared to pick up the pen." Maya nodded, understanding the weight of the moment. "Are you ready to start writing, Brittany?" For the first time in months, Brittany's smile was genuine, vulnerable, and full of hope. "I think I might be." The transformation didn't happen overnight. Real change never does. But over the following weeks, Maya watched as Brittany took her first tentative steps toward becoming the person she had once been, and the person she could still become. It started with small gestures that most students didn't even notice. Brittany holding doors open for classmates, saying excuse me instead of pushing through crowds, picking up trash in the hallways without being asked. Maya made sure to acknowledge these efforts whenever she witnessed them, offering genuine smiles and quiet words of encouragement. She understood that Brittany was fighting against years of defensive habits, against the voice in her head that whispered that kindness would only lead to pain again. Each small act of decency was a victory worth celebrating. The real test came 3 weeks later when freshman David, the same boy the twins had once protected from Brittany's intimidation, accidentally spilled his lunch all over himself in the cafeteria. The old Brittany would have laughed along with everyone else, perhaps even making a cruel joke to cement her superiority. But the Brittany who had been visiting elderly residents and remembering their stories saw only a young person in distress. Without hesitation, she walked over to David's table with a handful of napkins from her own lunch. "Here," she said simply, helping him clean up the mess. These things happen to everyone. The cafeteria fell silent, students staring in disbelief as former Queen Bee Brittany Morrison helped the freshman she had once terrorized. David looked up at her with wide, uncertain eyes, clearly expecting some kind of trick or cruel punchline. "Thank you," he whispered, still not quite believing what was happening. Brittany's voice was gentle, stripped of the commanding tone everyone associated with her. "You don't have to thank me for being decent. That should just be normal." Maya watched this interaction from across the cafeteria, her heart swelling with pride and hope. But she also noticed the mixed reactions from other students. Some looked impressed, others skeptical, and a few seemed almost disappointed that their former tormentor was becoming ordinary instead of remaining a villain they could hate. Change was messy and complicated, Maya realized. Not everyone wanted redemption stories. Some people preferred their bullies to remain bullies because it made the world feel simpler, more black and white. The real breakthrough came during the next visit to Sunset Manor. Maya and Brittany had been volunteering together for several weeks now, their partnership growing stronger as they worked side by side. Brittany had begun to relax around Maya, sometimes even laughing at her jokes or sharing memories from her childhood. On this particular day, they were helping residents write letters to family members when Mrs. Patterson pulled Maya aside. "That girl has been carrying a heavy burden for a long time," the elderly woman said, nodding toward Brittany, who was patiently helping Mr. Rodriguez spell words in English for a letter to his grandson. "Her grandmother, my dear friend Eleanor, she died 2 years ago. Brittany hasn't been the same since." Maya felt pieces of the puzzle click into place. Brittany's grandmother had been her anchor, her source of unconditional love and acceptance. When Eleanor passed away just as Brittany's parents' marriage was crumbling, she had lost the one person who had seen and nurtured her kindness. "Eleanor used to tell me stories about little Brittany," Mrs. Patterson continued, "how she would organize tea parties for imaginary friends and always set an extra place for anyone who looked lonely. How she cried for days when their neighbor's cat went missing, spending hours making flyers and knocking on doors. That little girl is still in there, buried under all that pain and anger." Armed with this new understanding, Maya approached Brittany differently. She stopped trying to change her and started simply accepting her, offering the kind of unconditional positive regard that Brittany had lost. When her grandmother died, the walls finally came down completely during their 6th visit to Sunset Manor. Brittany was reading to a group of residents when she came across a poem that her grandmother had loved. Her voice broke as she read the familiar words, and tears began to flow freely. Instead of trying to compose herself or hide her emotions, Brittany let herself grieve openly for the first time since Eleanor's funeral. Maya moved quietly to sit beside her, offering silent support as Brittany sobbed for everything she had lost: her grandmother's love, her parents' marriage, her own capacity for joy and kindness. "I miss her so much," Brittany whispered through her tears. "She was the only person who loved me just for being me, not for what I could do or how I could help their social status. When she died, I felt like the part of me that was worth loving died with her." Maya's own eyes filled with tears as she thought of her own grandmother's backpack, still bearing the scars of their first encounter. "She didn't take that part of you with her, Brittany. She left it here for you to share with the world. Every time you're kind to someone, every time you choose connection over control, you're honoring her memory. the residents at Sunset Manor, many of whom had experienced profound losses themselves, surrounded Brittany with understanding and comfort. They shared their own stories of grief, of losing people who had seen their true hearts, of finding ways to carry love forward even after goodbye. In that moment, surrounded by people who understood pain and healing, Brittany made a decision that would change her life forever. She chose to trust again, to be vulnerable again, to risk her heart again. She chose to let Maya see all of her, the scared, grieving, imperfect person she really was. "I want to apologize," Brittany said when they were driving back to school that day. "Really apologize. Not just to you, but to everyone I hurt. I want to make amends," Maya nodded, understanding the courage this decision required. Apologies are important, but actions matter more. The best apology is changed behavior. Over the remaining months of the school year, Brittany proved the sincerity of her transformation through consistent kindness and service. She joined Maya's peer tutoring program, using her intelligence and organizational skills to help struggling students. She volunteered for school cleanup days, organized fundraisers for local charities, and slowly rebuilt relationships based on mutual respect rather than fear. Not everyone forgave her immediately. Some students remained skeptical of her motives, watching for signs that her kindness was just another manipulation tactic. But Brittany persisted, understanding that trust had to be earned slowly and consistently. Marcus was the first of her former followers to truly forgive her, recognizing his own journey in hers. Jessica followed, bonded by their shared experience of discovering their authentic selves. The twins took longer, protective of their sister and wary of Brittany's motives, but eventually they too welcomed her into their growing circle of genuine friendship. By graduation day, Lincoln High School had become a fundamentally different place. The culture of fear and hierarchy that had once defined it had been replaced by something warmer and more inclusive. Students looked out for each other, celebrated each other's successes, and offered support during struggles. Maya stood at her locker on the last day of school, carefully packing her grandmother's backpack one final time. The patches were still visible, some perfectly repaired and others bearing the marks of their damage. It was a fitting metaphor, she thought, for the journey they had all taken. Brittany appeared beside her, no longer the terrifying queen bee she had once been, but not invisible either. She had found a middle path, confident without being cruel, strong without being dominating, memorable for her kindness rather than her power. "I still can't believe we're friends," Brittany said, shaking her head in amazement. Maya smiled, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. "My grandmother always said that the most beautiful things in life come from taking something broken and making it stronger than it was before." As they walked out of Lincoln High School together, Maya reflected on the lesson her grandmother's backpack had taught her. Sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty wasn't revenge or retaliation, but compassion and the patient work of building something better. She had come to this school as the new girl whose backpack was ripped by bullies. But she was leaving as a leader who had shown everyone, including the bullies themselves, that there was always another way to choose strength. Behind them, the halls of Lincoln High School echoed with the laughter and conversation of students who had learned that true power came not from tearing others down, but from lifting each other up. Maya's quiet revolution had succeeded not because she had destroyed her enemies, but because she had transformed them into friends. The backpack on her shoulders carried more than books now. It carried the weight of leadership, the responsibility of kindness, and the knowledge that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is offer someone the chance to become better than they ever thought possible.